When 10-year-old Dylan Reeves walked up to a table full of leather-vested bikers at a Denny's just off Route 40 outside Albuquerque and asked in a trembling voice if they could help him scare the kid who'd been making his life hell at school, the men exchanged glances that said they'd heard a lot of strange requests over the years, but this was a new one. The boy's face was bruised along the left cheekbone, his right eye still carrying the shadow of an older injury that had faded to yellow-green, and his hands shook as he clutched a wrinkled piece of notebook paper with an address scrawled in desperate handwriting. What started as a simple request from a bullied child would become something far bigger, something that would reveal just how alone Dylan had been and how a brotherhood of strangers could transform isolation into protection, fear into courage, and a 10-year-old's desperation into a moment that would change not just his life, but an entire community's understanding of what it means to show up for a kid who has no one else. The Denny's sat at the junction where Route 40 met the access road to Interstate 25, one of those places that existed primarily for travelers passing through, truckers needing coffee, families breaking up long drives with pancakes and bathroom stops. It was 2:30 on a Saturday afternoon in late September, the New Mexico sun still brutal, despite the calendar saying fall should be arriving, heat radiating off the asphalt parking lot in visible waves. Inside, the air conditioning worked overtime against the desert heat, while a handful of customers occupied booths and tables scattered throughout the dining room. Marcus Wrench Sullivan sat at a large corner booth with 5 of his brothers from the Desert Guardians Motorcycle Club, all of them road-worn and hungry after 3 hours of riding from Santa Fe. Wrench was 54 years old, the club's sergeant-at-arms, a man built like a fire hydrant with arms covered in tattoos that documented 26 years of riding and a beard that had gone more gray than brown over the past decade. The Desert Guardians had been together for 18 years, a tight brotherhood of veterans and working men who'd found family on the road after life had failed to provide it elsewhere. They ran charity rides for children's hospitals, raised money for veteran services, and maintained a reputation throughout New Mexico as the kind of club that law enforcement respected and communities welcomed. The 6 men were deep in conversation about their upcoming ride to Colorado when Wrench noticed the kid. The boy had entered through the front door alone, his eyes scanning the restaurant with the kind of desperate searching that Wrench recognized from his 2 tours in Iraq, the look of someone who needed help and didn't know where else to turn. The kid was small, for what Wrench guessed was 9 or 10 years old, skinny in that way that suggested either genetics or not enough food, wearing jeans that were too short and a faded Avengers t-shirt that had been washed so many times the colors had nearly disappeared. His dark brown hair needed cutting, falling over his forehead in a way that partially obscured his face, but not enough to hide the bruise that colored his left cheek or the way his right eye still showed signs of an older injury. The boys' gaze locked onto their table, onto 6 men in leather vests bearing the Desert Guardians patches, and something shifted in his expression. Not fear, which was what most kids showed when they saw a table full of bikers, but something closer to hope, mixed with terror, the look of someone about to take a leap they couldn't take back. He walked toward their table with small, deliberate steps, his hands clenched around something that Wrench couldn't quite see, and stopped about 3 feet away. Wrench watched the kid's throat work as he swallowed hard, watched him gather courage that a 10-year-old shouldn't need to gather, and then the boy spoke in a voice that barely carried over the diner's ambient noise. "Excuse me, could you help me scare someone?" The table went quiet. 6 men who'd seen combat, who'd dealt with bar fights and road incidents and every kind of strange situation that came with riding, all stopped mid-conversation and stared at this small boy with the bruised face and the desperate eyes. Bull, the club's president and a man who'd served as an Army Ranger before retiring to ride full-time, leaned forward slightly. "What do you mean by scare someone, son?" The boy's hands were shaking now, the paper he held crinkling with the tremors. "There's a kid at my school who beats me up. He won't stop and the teachers don't do anything, and my mom works 2 jobs so she's never home. And I thought maybe if someone big came and talked to him, he'd leave me alone." The boy's voice cracked. "Please. I don't know what else to do. He hurts me all the time and nobody cares, and I just want him to stop." Wrench felt something cold settle in his chest, that particular anger that came from seeing a child in genuine distress, from recognizing that this kid had exhausted every other option and was now standing in a Denny's asking strangers for help because no one else had stepped up. He exchanged glances with Bull, with Razor and Smokey and the other brothers at the table, and saw his own reaction reflected back. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't a kid being dramatic. This was real fear and real desperation, and a child who'd been failed by every system that was supposed to protect him. Bull gestured to the empty space at the end of the booth. "Why don't you sit down and tell us what's going on? What's your name?" "Dylan. Dylan Reeves." The boy slid into the booth seat, still clutching that piece of paper, his small frame looking even smaller against the vinyl upholstery. "How old are you, Dylan?" 10. "I'm in 5th grade at Roosevelt Elementary." "And there's someone there who's hurting you?" Dylan nodded, and Wrench could see him fighting back tears. "His name is Travis Keller. He's in 6th grade, and he's bigger than everyone, and he's been beating me up since school started. He takes my lunch money. He pushes me into lockers. He punched me in the face 2 weeks ago and gave me this." Dylan gestured to the fading bruise around his eye. "And yesterday he did this. He touched the fresh bruise on his cheek. The teachers say they'll handle it, but they never do anything. They just tell us to work it out ourselves. And I tried telling my mom, but she's always at work, and when she's home, she's too tired to deal with it, and I don't have a dad, and I just wanted someone to help me." The words came out in a rush, months of frustration and fear and loneliness pouring out to 6 strangers in a Denny's booth because they were the first people who'd actually asked, who'd actually seemed like they might do something. Wrench felt that cold anger deepen, felt it settle into the kind of determination that had gotten him through 2 deployments and 18 years of riding. This kid had come to them because he had nowhere else to go, and that meant they had a responsibility to do something about it. "What's on the paper?" "On," Wrench asked gently. Dylan unfolded it with shaking hands and laid it flat on the table. It was lined notebook paper with an address written in careful, desperate handwriting, followed by a date and time. "This is where Travis lives. And tomorrow at 2 in the afternoon, his family is having a birthday party in their backyard. Lots of people will be there. I thought maybe if you showed up on your motorcycles and looked scary, he'd get afraid and leave me alone." Dylan's voice dropped to a whisper. "I just want him to stop hurting me. I don't want to go to school anymore because I'm scared all the time and nobody will help me." The table was silent for a long moment, 6 men processing what they'd just heard, processing the fact that this 10-year-old had been so desperate, so alone, that he'd planned this out, had found an address, had worked up the courage to approach a table full of strangers and ask for help, because every adult who was supposed to care had failed him. Bull spoke first, his voice carrying the authority that had commanded soldiers in combat and now led a motorcycle club. "Dylan, we're going to help you. But we need to understand the full situation first. Where's your mother right now?" "She's at work. She works at the hospital cleaning rooms. She won't be home until after midnight, and she doesn't know you're here." Dylan shook his head. "I told her I was going to the library. She thinks I'm there doing homework. Does anyone know where you really are?" "No, sir." Wrench leaned forward. "Dylan, I need you to listen to me carefully. We're going to help you, but we're going to do it the right way. You've been incredibly brave, coming here and asking for help. That took real courage. But we can't just show up at someone's house to intimidate a kid without involving the proper people. What we can do is make sure that everyone who should be protecting you starts doing their job. We can make sure your school understands this is serious. We can make sure your mother knows what's happening. And we can make damn sure that Travis Keller understands that you're not alone anymore, that you've got people watching out for you. Would that work?" Dylan's eyes filled with tears. "You'll really help me? You're not going to tell me to just ignore him or that kids will be kids or that I need to toughen up? Because that's what everyone else says, and it doesn't help, and I'm so tired of being scared." "We're really going to help you," Bull said firmly. "And anyone who tells a 10-year-old to just toughen up when he's being beaten up doesn't understand what real toughness is. Real toughness is asking for help when you need it. Real toughness is standing here in front of 6 strangers and being honest about being scared. You've already shown more courage than most adults I know." The boy started crying then, not the dramatic sobbing of a child throwing a tantrum, but the quiet, exhausted crying of someone who'd been holding everything together for too long and finally had permission to fall apart. Wrench slid out of the booth and moved to sit beside Dylan, putting a careful hand on the boy's shoulder. "You're safe now, kid. You did the right thing. You found help, and we're not going to let you down." Dylan leaned into Wrench's side and cried for several minutes while 6 bikers sat in protective silence, while the diner's other patrons pretended not to notice, while a waitress approached and then backed away after Bull shook his head, giving the kid time to process everything he'd been carrying alone. When Dylan finally pulled himself together, wiping his face with his sleeve, Bull had his phone out. "I'm going to call your mother at the hospital. We're going to explain what's happening, and we're going to make sure she understands how serious this is. Then we're going to contact your school and make sure they understand that if they don't take immediate action, we're going to escalate this to the school board and the police. And tomorrow, if it's okay with your mom, we're going to show up at that birthday party. Not to scare anyone, but to make it very clear that you've got protection now, that hurting you comes with consequences." Dylan looked up at Bull with red-rimmed eyes. "You'd really come to the party? All of you?" Bull smiled, the kind of smile that was both gentle and promised trouble for anyone who crossed them. "All of us and anyone else from the club who can make it. If we're going to send a message, we might as well send a clear one." Razor, the club's vice president and a man who'd worked as a high school counselor before retiring, spoke up. "Dylan, can you tell us more about what's been happening at school? How often does Travis hurt you?" "Every day. He finds me at recess or in the hallway between classes. He takes my lunch money so I don't eat most days. He pushes me and calls me names and punches me when teachers aren't looking. And when I tried to tell my teacher, she said I was being dramatic and that Travis was just being rough the way boys are. She said I needed to stop being so sensitive." Wrench felt his jaw tighten at that, at the casual dismissal of a child's genuine fear by an adult who should have known better, who should have recognized the difference between rough play and systematic abuse. He'd seen that same dismissiveness in his own childhood, had carried the scars of being told to toughen up when what he'd needed was for someone to actually protect him. "That's not okay," Wrench said quietly. "None of that is okay. Teachers have a responsibility to protect students, and if they're not doing that, we're going to make sure they understand their failure. But first, let's get your mom involved." Bull called the hospital, explained the situation to the supervisor who answered, and within minutes had Dylan's mother on the line. Her name was Rebecca Reeves, and her voice carried the exhaustion of someone working herself to the bone to keep a roof over her child's head. Bull explained who he was, where Dylan was, what the boy had told them, and why they were calling. There was a long silence on the other end, and when Rebecca finally spoke, her voice was thick with tears and guilt. "I knew something was wrong. He's been so quiet lately and he doesn't want to go to school, and I saw the bruises. But he said he fell, and I believed him because I wanted to believe him, because I'm never home and I'm failing him, and I don't know how to do this alone." Bull's voice was gentle but firm. "Ma'am, you're not failing him. You're working 2 jobs to provide for him, and that's not failure. That's sacrifice. But he needs you to hear him right now. He needs you to know what's happening and to be part of the solution. We want to help, but we need your permission and your involvement. Can you take a break and come down here?" Rebecca said she'd be there in 20 minutes and hung up to tell her supervisor she had a family emergency. While they waited, the Desert Guardians bought Dylan lunch, a burger and fries that the boy devoured with the hunger of someone who hadn't been eating regularly, and they asked him about his life, his interests, what he liked to do when he wasn't dealing with Travis Keller. Dylan told them about loving to draw, about wanting to be an artist someday, about his collection of comic books that he kept hidden in his room because Travis had destroyed his backpack once, and he didn't want to risk losing anything else important. He told them about his mother working at the hospital and at a grocery store, about never seeing her because their schedules never aligned, about eating dinner alone most nights and going to bed before she got home. He told them about missing his father, who'd left when Dylan was 4 and never came back, about not having any other family nearby, about feeling invisible most of the time except when Travis was hurting him. The more Dylan talked, the clearer the picture became to these 6 men, a picture of a child falling through every safety net that was supposed to catch him, of systems failing and adults too overwhelmed or too indifferent to notice. Rebecca Reeves arrived still wearing her hospital cleaning uniform, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, her face showing the deep exhaustion of someone who'd been running on empty for too long. She was younger than Wrench expected, probably only in her early 30s, but she carried herself with the weariness of someone much older. She spotted Dylan in the booth and rushed over, pulling him into a tight hug that made the boy start crying again. "I'm sorry, baby. I'm so sorry I didn't know. I'm sorry I didn't listen better. I should have seen." Dylan clung to her and Wrench had to look away because watching that reunion, watching a mother realize she'd missed her child suffering, was almost too painful to witness. Bull introduced himself and the other club members, explained what Dylan had told them, showed Rebecca the paper with Travis Keller's address. He outlined their plan to contact the school on Monday, to demand immediate action, to involve the police if necessary given the pattern of assault, and he asked for her permission to attend the birthday party the next day, to make it clear to Travis and his family that Dylan wasn't alone anymore. Rebecca listened with tears streaming down her face, one hand gripping Dylan's shoulder like she was afraid to let go. "You'd really do all that for him? For a kid you just met?" Bull nodded. "Ma'am, we wear these patches because we believe in brotherhood, in protecting people who can't protect themselves. Your son showed more courage walking up to our table than most adults show in their entire lives. He asked for help, and we don't ignore that. We take care of our own, and as of right now, Dylan's under our protection." Rebecca broke down completely then, sobbing with the release of months of stress and fear and guilt, and Dylan held his mother while she cried, this 10-year-old boy comforting his parent because that's what he'd learned to do. The Desert Guardians sat in respectful silence, giving them time, giving them space, but making it clear through their presence that they weren't going anywhere. When Rebecca finally composed herself, she looked at Bull with red-rimmed eyes. "What do I need to do?" "First," Bull said, "you need to document everything, every bruise, every incident Dylan can remember, dates and times if possible. We need a written record. Second, you're coming with us on Monday to meet with the principal, and if they don't take immediate action, we're going to the school board and the police. Third, tomorrow at 2 in the afternoon, as many of us as can make it are going to ride to that address and we're going to have a conversation with Travis Keller's parents about their son's behavior. We won't threaten anyone. We won't do anything illegal. But we're going to make it very clear that Dylan has protection now." Rebecca nodded slowly, processing everything. "Can I ask why you're doing this? Why you care so much about a kid you don't know?" Wrench answered that one, his voice rough with emotion he didn't try to hide. "Because every single one of us at this table knows what it's like to need help and not have anyone show up. Because we've all been that kid at some point, the one who felt alone and scared and like nobody cared. Because we formed this club to be the people we needed when we were younger. Because your son did something incredibly brave today, and that deserves to be honored. And because it's the right thing to do." That evening, Wrench made phone calls to every member of the Desert Guardians, explaining the situation, asking who could make it the next day. The response was immediate and overwhelming. 18 bikers said they'd be there, some driving in from as far as Las Cruces and Farmington. Word spread to allied clubs, and by nightfall, Wrench had commitments from members of 3 other New Mexico motorcycle clubs who'd heard the story and wanted to be part of sending a message. By the time Dylan went to bed that night, sleeping better than he had in months because his mother was home early and because he knew he wasn't alone anymore, 52 bikers had committed to showing up at Travis Keller's birthday party. Sunday afternoon at 1:30, Dylan stood outside his apartment building with his mother, both of them staring in disbelief as motorcycles began arriving. They came from every direction, a thunder of engines that echoed off the buildings, 52 bikes representing 4 different clubs, all united by one purpose. The Desert Guardians led the formation, Bull and Wrench at the front, but behind them rode members of the Iron Brotherhood, the Road Warriors, and the Veteran Guard, all of them wearing their colors, all of them there for a 10-year-old boy who'd asked for help. Dylan's face was a mixture of awe and disbelief. "You all came. All of you came for me." "We told you we would," Wrench said, kneeling down to Dylan's level. "When we make a promise, we keep it. Now here's what's going to happen. Your mom is going to ride with Bull in his truck. You're going to ride with me on my bike, and we're all going to go to that birthday party together. We're not going to start trouble." We're just going to make sure everyone there understands that you matter, that you're protected, and that hurting you comes with consequences." They suited Dylan up in a borrowed helmet that was too big, settled him on the back of Wrench's Harley, and the boy's small arms wrapped around Wrench's waist, with a grip that spoke of trust and relief and the beginning of feeling safe. The procession rode through Albuquerque with the kind of presence that made people stop and stare. 52 motorcycles moving in formation, engines roaring in synchronized thunder. They turned onto residential streets where children playing outside stopped to watch, where adults came out of houses to see what the noise was about, where the sheer visual impact of that many bikers riding together commanded attention and respect. They pulled up to Travis Keller's house at exactly 2 o'clock, parking in a perfect formation that blocked half the street, and the birthday party in the backyard went silent. Travis Keller was 12 years old, big for his age, and standing next to a table full of presents when he saw Dylan climb off the back of a motorcycle surrounded by 52 leather-vested bikers. The boy's face went pale, and something that might have been fear flickered across his features for the first time. Dylan walked up to the fence with Wrench beside him, with Bull and the other club presidents flanking them, and the adults at the party, Travis's parents and relatives and neighbors, all stopped what they were doing to stare at this unexpected arrival. Bull spoke first, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd commanded soldiers and now led men who'd follow him anywhere. "My name is Bull. I'm president of the Desert Guardians Motorcycle Club. We're here because Dylan Reeves asked us for help. Your son Travis has been systematically beating him up, stealing from him, and terrorizing him at school for months. The teachers have done nothing. Dylan's mother works 2 jobs and didn't know the extent of what was happening. So Dylan came to us and asked if we could scare Travis into leaving him alone. He was so desperate that he approached a table full of strangers because he had no one else. We're not here to threaten anyone. We're not here to start trouble. But we are here to deliver a message. Dylan is under our protection now. If Travis or anyone else touches him again, if he's bullied or hurt or intimidated in any way, 52 of us will know about it, and we'll be back. Not to hurt anyone, but to make sure every authority that should be handling this actually does their job. The school, the police, everyone. Am I clear?" Travis's father, a man in his 40s with the kind of face that suggested he'd never been challenged in his life, stepped forward with indignation written across his features. "You can't just show up at my house and threaten my son. I'll call the police." Bull didn't flinch. "Please do. Call them right now. We'll wait. And while we're waiting, we can discuss the fact that your son has been committing assault on a 10-year-old child, and you apparently either don't know or don't care. We can discuss why a 6th grader thinks it's acceptable to beat up a smaller kid and steal his lunch money. We can discuss your parenting and what kind of example you're setting. So yes, please call the police. I'd love to have that conversation on record." The man's face reddened, but he didn't reach for his phone, and everyone at that party knew why. Travis's mother stepped forward instead, her face showing something closer to shame than anger. "Is it true? Has Travis been hurting this boy?" Dylan nodded, his voice quiet but steady because Wrench's hand was on his shoulder and 52 bikers were at his back. "Every day for 2 months. He punches me and pushes me and takes my money, and the teachers don't stop him. I'm scared to go to school. I don't eat lunch most days. I just wanted him to leave me alone." Travis's mother turned to her son, who was standing very still, very quiet, and very afraid. "Travis, is this true?" The boy didn't answer, and his silence was answer enough. Bull continued, his voice firm but not cruel. "Ma'am, we're not here to humiliate your son or ruin his birthday. We're here because the systems that should have addressed this failed. Starting Monday, Dylan's mother's meeting with the school principal, and if necessary, filing a police report. Your son needs consequences and counseling and to understand that his behavior is unacceptable. What he does not need is to be protected or excused. We're giving you the chance to handle this as a family. But make no mistake, we'll be watching, and if this continues, we'll escalate. Are we clear?" Travis's mother nodded slowly, tears forming in her eyes as the reality of what her son had been doing settled in. "We're clear. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. And I'm sorry," she said to Dylan, "that you've been going through this. You shouldn't have had to ask strangers for help. Adults should have protected you. Dylan looked at Travis, who couldn't meet his eyes, and said something that surprised everyone. I don't want to hurt you. I just want you to stop hurting me. I just want to go to school without being scared. That's all I ever wanted. The party was silent. 52 bikers stood witness to a 10-year-old boy showing more maturity and grace than most of the adults present. Bull nodded to Dylan. We're done here. Let's go. They walked back to the bikes, Dylan climbing onto the back of Wrench's Harley, and the procession rode away with the same thunderous presence they had arrived with, leaving behind a birthday party that would never be forgotten and a message that would spread through Roosevelt Elementary and beyond. Monday morning, Rebecca took time off work to meet with the school principal, accompanied by Bull, Wrench, and 2 other desert guardians who were there simply as witnesses and support. The principal, a woman in her 50s who'd been at the school for 20 years, started the meeting with defensive explanations about how they couldn't monitor every student interaction, how kids needed to learn to handle conflict themselves. Bull let her talk for exactly 2 minutes before cutting her off. Ma'am, Dylan Reeves has been beaten up repeatedly on your campus. He has documented injuries. Your staff has been told about this and has done nothing. That's not teaching conflict resolution. That's negligence. Now, here's what's going to happen. You're going to immediately separate Dylan and Travis into different classes. You're going to assign a staff member to check on Dylan daily. You're going to implement an actual anti-bullying program instead of lip service. And you're going to document all of this in writing. If you don't, we're going to the school board, the district superintendent, and the local news. And I promise you, the story of a 10-year-old so desperate he had to ask a motorcycle club for help because his school failed him is exactly the kind of story that gets administrators fired. The principal's defensive posture crumbled. She agreed to everything, put it in writing, and within 2 days, Dylan had been moved to a different class. Travis had been suspended pending a meeting with his parents and a counselor, and the school had announced a new zero-tolerance bullying policy. But the Desert Guardians didn't stop there. They set up a fund to provide Dylan with daily lunches. They created a mentorship program where Wrench and other members took turns checking on him, helping with homework, teaching him basic motorcycle maintenance, giving him the male role models and support system he'd never had. They made sure Rebecca could reduce her hours at one of her jobs by supplementing her income through club fundraising efforts. They essentially adopted Dylan into their brotherhood and made it clear to everyone in his life that he mattered. 3 months later, Dylan stood at the Desert Guardians clubhouse wearing a jacket they'd given him, not full patches because he was too young, but a jacket that marked him as under their protection, as part of their family. He'd gained weight, was eating regularly, and the fear that had haunted his eyes that day at Denny's was gone. He was drawing again, had shown Wrench sketches of motorcycles and portraits of the club members that displayed genuine talent. His grades had improved. His mother was sleeping better, and Travis Keller, who was in counseling and had been required to write an apology letter, had left Dylan completely alone. More than that, other kids at school had started standing up for Dylan, had started sitting with him at lunch, because everyone knew about the 52 bikers who'd shown up at a birthday party. The story had become legend, and with it, Dylan had gone from invisible and victimized to someone worth knowing. At the clubhouse that afternoon, Bull gathered everyone together and had Dylan stand in the center. This kid taught us something important. He taught us that asking for help when you need it is the bravest thing you can do. He taught us that being vulnerable isn't weakness. And he taught us that our brotherhood means something beyond rides and patches. It means showing up when someone needs us. It means being the people who pay attention when everyone else looks away. Dylan, you're family now. You'll always have a place here. You'll always have people watching out for you. And when you're old enough, if you want to earn your full patches, you'll have that opportunity. But right now, you're exactly what you need to be, a 10-year-old kid who's safe and protected and valued. Dylan looked around at the faces of men who'd been strangers 3 months ago and were now the closest thing to fathers and uncles he'd ever known. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for believing me. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for making me matter. Wrench knelt down to Dylan's level. You always mattered, kid. We just made sure everyone else knew it too. And that's what we do. We show up for people who need us. We pay attention when others look away. We take action when action is needed. That's what brotherhood means. The Desert Guardians continued their regular activities, their charity rides and veteran support and community outreach. But they added something new, a program called We See You, focused on identifying and helping kids who were falling through the cracks, who were being bullied or abused or neglected, who needed someone to notice and care. They partnered with schools and social services. They trained members to recognize signs of trouble, and they made it clear that any child in their community could approach them for help and would be taken seriously. Over the next 5 years, they intervened in 12 more situations. Some were bullying cases like Dylan's. Others involved kids in unsafe home situations, runaways who needed resources, teenagers being recruited into gangs who needed alternatives. Each time, the Desert Guardians showed up, made noise, demanded action from the systems that should have been working, and provided support until situations stabilized. Each time, they proved that a community of people committed to protecting vulnerable kids could make a real difference. Dylan grew up surrounded by that brotherhood. He learned to ride at 16 with Wrench teaching him on a practice bike. He learned about loyalty and honor and what it meant to be part of something bigger than yourself. He learned that strength wasn't about intimidating others, but about protecting them. And he never forgot that he'd been saved by strangers who'd chosen to see him when he needed to be seen. When Dylan turned 18, he stood in the Desert Guardians clubhouse and formally requested to prospect, to earn his full patches through the traditional year of proving himself. The vote was unanimous. He prospected with dedication and humility, never trading on his history with the club, working twice as hard to prove he deserved to be there. And on his 19th birthday, they gave him his full patches in a ceremony attended by over 100 bikers from clubs across New Mexico, all of whom knew his story. Bull pinned on the final patch, and Dylan stood there wearing his colors with tears streaming down his face. Your father isn't here to see this, but we are. Your real father wasn't the man who left. Your real fathers are the men in this room who showed up, who stayed, who taught you what it means to be a good man. Welcome to the brotherhood, Dylan. Welcome home. Years later, Dylan became a counselor working with at-risk youth, using his own story to connect with kids who felt alone and scared. He told them about the day he walked into a Denny's and asked strangers for help. He told them about 52 motorcycles showing up at a birthday party. He told them that asking for help was brave, that being vulnerable was strong, that there were people in the world who would show up if you gave them the chance. And sometimes, when his young clients needed extra support, he'd bring them to the Desert Guardians clubhouse and let them meet the men who'd saved him, who'd proved that chosen family could be stronger than blood, that brotherhood meant showing up when someone needed you, and that one act of courage asking for help could change everything.